Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Hot Rod Bob, and you've got Gas, the morning edition. Great American Auto Scene since 1990, your source for information and automotive trivia and a little humor stuck in there as well. Hey, thanks for tuning in this morning or this afternoon or this evening, whether you're on YouTube, Anchor FM, Apple iTunes, or wherever you're listening to or watching Gas, the Great American Auto Scene. Thanks for tuning in. All right, what is a roadster? Well, this is a car that invaded the United States after World War II and became quite popular, fading off in the 80s, but they're still popular among enthusiasts. So what is a roadster? Well, Motor Junkie, and I like this website, check it out, says a roadster is basically a two-seater convertible. Well, okay, but the LA Roadster Car Club might disagree with you. The definition of a roadster in the United States has been a car that does not have roll-up windows, although the name is used loosely. Most convertible two-seaters are called roadsters, but when you get into the actual dynamics of what a roadster is, the early Fords, Chevrolets, and others that were roadsters, two-seat, open-top cars. They had a canvas roof. They had side curtains, not roll-up windows. The roll-up window cars became called convertibles or cabriolets, but were not roadsters. And that was the defining difference. And the LA Roadster Car Club, that's been around for well over 60 years, has that distinction in their membership as well. The last Ford Roadster, 1939. Was it a sports car? Far from it. It was a full-size car, but no roll-up windows. Or was it 37? I forget which. It's probably 37. 39 was the last year of a rumble seat. All right, but Motor Junkie, they've got some interesting topics, and they have a quiz out there that you can go to, and it asks what a roadster is. Their feature photo was an MG Midget. Now, the MG Midgets did have side curtains. They also had roll-up windows as they got newer, as they updated them. The Bug Eyes Sprite, for example, like I had side curtains. The TR3s, MGTDs, MGAs, and such had side curtains. Those were the original roadsters. TR3s, no roll-up windows in those. It wasn't until the TR4 came out and the MGB that those two popular British cars got roll-up windows. So what is the most popular or most famous roadsters of all times? Well, they've got to be the Triumphs and the MGs. The MGTDs, MGAs, MGTFs, all roadsters with side curtains. TR3, TR2, side curtains. Their later TRs, the Triumphs, TR4, began with roll-up windows. Now we move on to who else made what Motor Junkie is called roadsters. Fiat made a number of them. The 124 Spider, the 850 Spider. They had a number of two-seat roadsters by their definition. They had roll-up windows. They were quite sophisticated for the time. The 850 Spider had an 850cc engine in the back. It was rear-wheel drive, rear-engined, and kind of a fun car. Swing axles that made this car very tricky to drive. And as many said about the Corvair, where the wheels would tuck and the cars would roll over, so did those little Fiat 850s. The 124 twin cam, basically a less expensive Alfa Romeo, because they had a lot of the features the Alfa had, and the Alfa was noted for their open two-seaters or roadsters. Now, another car that came to mind with roadsters was, well, the Alpine. The Sunbeam Alpine and the Sunbeam Tiger. The Tiger was a poor man's Cobra, and they're climbing in value today, as is the Sunbeam Alpine. Now, the Alpine was a four-cylinder version, same body as the Tiger got, but a four-cylinder engine. Shelby's hand got in there, and he made the Tiger a possible vehicle for the enthusiast. And they were sold throughout the U.S. and, well, a lot of other places as well. So what were the two most popular British roadsters that came into the U.S.? Well, for the enthusiast, it was the MG series and the Triumph series. But were there others? Yeah. I had a Jag Roadster. I had a Jag Drophead Coupe. It had roll-up windows. See, even the British did not call, initially, a Roadster, a car that had roll-up windows. It was called the drop-head coupe. It was a convertible top that came up, and it had roll-up windows. But the MGs and the Triumphs are given credit for being the most prolific British sports cars or roadsters in the U.S. Now, the early 850 Spider was kind of neat. Had glass-covered headlights, nice styling, very appealing looks, but lacking in power. Now, it was fine in Europe and in Italy, where the roads are tight and narrow. This was a nice little car for that, and where they really don't have places to really get up to high speeds. The fuel economy was great with these little cars as well. Now, the MG started coming over initially after World War II, with a lot of the American servicemen bringing them back from Europe after being stationed there. The Triumphs came in a little bit later, but not in the initial surge of sports cars. The initial surge coming into the U.S. and roadsters were MGs. Triumph really didn't have anything on the market until the late 1950s. The TR2 came out, then the TR3. Now, there were other roadsters out there, and some of them, like the Riley, were a little bit more glitzy, a little bit less performance-oriented. They were roadsters, they were convertibles, they were just not as exciting as the MGs and the Triumphs of the day. Good morning to all that are watching right now. Rhett Vincent and Robert Dolan, thank you for tuning in. All right, now when did the roadsters start to hit their peak in the United States? Well, according to Motor Junkie, it was the late 60s, early 1970s. And this was before emissions and crash standards went into play. That is what killed the British roadsters. They had trouble meeting those standards. Oh, yeah, MG put big rubber bumpers on the front of the MG, and it somewhat met the standard, but it was ugly. And they didn't last very long, and MG pulled out of the United States market. Now, who else brought in cars of this nature to try and compete in the U.S. market for the roadster business? Well, Renault. And Renault had one they called the Renault Fluoride. Didn't help your teeth at all, but it did empty your pocket. And it was just about as reliable as the other Renaults that had come into the U.S. They were great for Europe, but not for the U.S. market. Didn't have the power. They wore out real quick. Colin Millar, how are you doing? Or Colin Millar, how are you doing? Tommy O'Brien and John Mullen, thanks for tuning in. Now, there was other roadsters on the market as well. And like I said, most of them came from either Great Britain or Italy. And those are the ones that came into the U.S. MG had a variation on the B series, or the body that was on the B series. They had a V8 version. They also had a 6-cylinder version, the MGC and the MGB V8. Excellent cars. The V8, though, would be my preference. It had the aluminum V8 that was originally designed by Buick, plenty of horsepower, light in weight, compact in size, and would make these cars run. They could get up to 30 miles per gallon with a 5-speed manual transmission. The MGC was a little bit nose-heavy with its Austin Healey-derived 6-cylinder. It was cool looking with its bulging hood to clear the front of the engine compartment. Austin Healey was another company very strong in the U.S. I had a Bug-Eye Sprite Austin Healey. Well, a 4-cylinder. It was the forerunner to the MG Midget, and it had the headlights mounted up on the hood. Originally, they were supposed to be pop-up headlights, but the cost of making the pop-up headlights back in those days was overshadowed by the cost of just bolting them onto the hood. And so they did. Austin Healey had a number of vehicles, from 4-cylinder big cars, the Austin Healey 100s, to the 3000s with the 6-cylinder engine. They were great-looking cars. They were around for a long time, and they even ended up having a back seat at some point in time. Triumphs kind of had a padded parcel shelf in the back. The Bug-Eye Sprite here in the U.S. was called the Frog Eye in Europe. 948 cc's of 46 horsepower were the power plant. And I raced one of those. Did pretty good with it. I liked it. It was fun. Now, that engine was shared with non-sports cars as well, such as the Morris Minor 1000s. Were the roadsters successful in racing? Yes, they were. I won a number of times with my Bug-Eye Sprite. Paul Newman was known for his prowess in the Triumph TR6. Yes, he started with that baby and was tough to beat, especially at his home track here in Riverside, California, or Connecticut. MGBs were excellent as well, as were the A's. Alfa Romeo had the Spider, and it was very well received, although it had some issues too, and with pure European reliability, it did not go over well in the United States after a while. People got tired of working on it. The original guys and gals buying sports cars were quite capable of working on the cars, tuning, adjusting, and setting them up. Later owners were more interested in image, and with that image and lemon laws and so forth that came about, the favor of these cars kind of faded away because, well, Alfa Romeo was quite capable of making owners into mechanics, and that was not an acceptable practice here in the U.S. as things went by. Now, what was the forerunner to the Shelby Cobras? Now, you think about that for a bit, and there was a car called the AC. The AC Roadster, which does look quite a bit like what ended up being the Cobra, was the forerunner to the Cobra. And AC had a little six-cylinder engine in their car. Beautiful looking sports car. They changed some things. The later model ACs are what became the Cobra. They did make other cars as well. Now the Japanese got into this mix as well, and Datsun sports cars started showing up on the U.S. shores. Now, initially, they were called the Fair Lady because the upper management at Nissan, which was the corporate name, went to some plays and, loved My Fair Lady. And that's what they named their sports cars. Even the 240Z was a Fair Lady Z. Mr. Katayama decided, we're not selling that crap here. We changed the names. So the sports cars changed names from the Fair Ladies to the 1500, the 1600, and the 2000 Roadsters. When the 240Z came into the country, the 240 was the engineering code. He put that on the sides of the vehicle, took off the Fair Lady badging, and the car was a rousing success. All right, are Roadsters desirable collector cars? You bet. There are people scouring the country for good sports cars because they did not have reliability or longevity. And most of the MGs and Triumphs from the East and the Snowbelt area are gone. You could watch them rust overnight. You could actually see the body parts falling off. All right, not really. But people come to the West Coast for a sports car because they didn't rust away here in Southern California like they did in other states. And even the Northern California area where the humidity and the moisture in the air is prevalent, and the cars tended to rust. They were not made for longevity. Even in their home country of Great Britain, the MGs would rust away before your eyes. And you can build an MG. The heritage bodies are available. It's a complete MG body, less the suspension and drivetrain and interior. And you can put together a brand new MG. Moss Motors in Goleta, California can set you up with an MGB or a BGT. Now, there are other cars and other sports cars that came in the country. Honda did bring in a two-seater initially, the Honda 600 sports cars. There was the Innocenti Spider, which was a variation of the Fiat. Not too many of those showed up. And there have been some that really didn't make it anywhere, including some Japanese roadsters by Suzuki. And the Suzuki Cappuccino is one of them, although my friend up in Vegas, that Cat, she's been driving her Cappuccino and loves that little thing. It's not a U.S. spec vehicle, though, so they brought it in and done some conversion work. Now, what was some of the last roadsters that kind of spoiled the roadster market? The TR7 and TR8s were prime examples of that. When the TR7 came out, the slogan for them was the shape of things to come. Now, initially, the TR6 or 7 came out as a coupe, not a roadster. There were plans to make it a fastback. They called it the Lynx. It never happened. But they did come out with a roadster version of the TR7, and it actually wasn't that bad looking. It just was not very reliable. TBR, you're right, Terry, they had some roadsters as well in the coupes. The TR7 and the TR8 available with the drop top feature. TR8 having that Buick Rover V8 engine under the hood. That's one of the cars on my bucket list, and my bucket list is actually a bathtub size, so there's a lot of stuff there. TR8s, TR7s, interesting looking cars, did well in racing under the Bob Tullius team. Now, Fiat 124 Spiders, we talked about a little bit. They stayed in the country for quite some time, and they are back. And it was a joint venture between Mazda and Fiat. Mazda building their version, Fiat building their version. Same basic car, although the Fiat gets less horsepower and a turbocharged, smaller engine. Don't know how good that is. Now, Triumph had a number of different roadsters they brought into this country, including the Spitfires, the TR2, the TR3, the Herald, which really wasn't a sports car, but it was a two-seat boxy car that was also available as a coupe. And it was more of a grocery getter car. The car that really put Mazda on the map, not the RX-7 or the RX-2, which were quite popular, but the Mazda Miata. And that car is still in production, and it is a cool car. A friend of ours brought one out to one of our autocrosses one time, and I got to drive it when they first came out, and it was great. All right, Sam Fiorini is correcting me and helping me. I do appreciate everything you give me, Sam. The Fiat 124, the Fiat Spider now, also made by Mazda, but they do get different engines. And I'm correct on that one, right, Sam? Because I believe the Fiat's getting a turbo version. TR6 was one of the last great British sports cars in my mind, and I love that TR6. It's another car on the bucket list. 6-cylinder inline motor, 2.4 liters, 4-speed with overdrive option. Very nice styling, very smooth, very good sports car. They're getting popular. They're going up in value. MG did recreate the sports car again, and Fiat provides the engine. Thanks, Sam. And it is kind of a nice looking car, currently available in the UK, but it's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit bloated in size. It's not as stylish looking, but does resemble the original MGB. Could you bring that car over to the US? If you got the money, go for it, guys. Now, what is the engine configuration or drivetrain configuration of a true sports car? Front engine, rear drive. And Sam Fiorini is telling me about the TRs. We start out with the TR2, TR4, TR5 or TR250 as it was marketed here in the US, TR6, and they are going up in value. They are really climbing. The MG is a great car, and honest, I've owned TRs and I've owned MGs. The MG is a far more solid vehicle. It's a unibody, whereas the TR series, TR2, 3, 4, 5, 6, were body on frame. They rattle, they squeak, they're noisier. The MG was far more solid, just less horsepower. And that's where the TR excelled. The Austin Healey's were great. Now, one thing Motor Junkie is saying is that the U.S. never had a roadster, or never produced any roadsters in any flavor. Well, they forgot about the Corvette. Now, Aunt Sam's saying the MG RV8 was the rebirth of the MG back in the 1990s. Yes, it was. And I do like the looks of it. It's just a little bit bigger and looks a little bit bloated next to an MGB, but it definitely did look like it. Sam Fiorini says the MGF doesn't fit the definition with the engine in the back. You're right, but neither does the Fiat Spiders, the 850s. The engine was in the back on those as well. And Hondas were front-wheel drive, and I think the Suzuki was too. Although some of the Hondas, the 600 was a rear-wheel drive sports car. And so is the S2000, which, again, Motor Junkie doesn't bring up at all, and that was quite an interesting car coming from Honda. Now, the first sports car that came in from Honda was chain drive. And I got to see one of those when the local Honda dealer started bringing or taking on the car line here in Southern California. And it was quite an interesting looking car. And in typical Japanese fashion was very tiny back in the time. But Motor Junkie, back to the sports car thing, says the American market, it said, did the American industry produce any roadsters? And they're saying no. Well, they're flat wrong. The original Corvette side curtains, drop top, no roll-up windows. It was a true roadster. Now, the automatic transmission was its downfall to an extent in that sports car people didn't want to do that. They wanted to shift for themselves. And that is where Generous Motors missed the mark. They came back in 1955 and added the manual transmission, 3-speed at the time. And Sam Fiorini, RV8, used the reproduced MGB body. Oh, did it? Okay. And they're the same size, fatter fenders, though. Yeah, okay. And in the photos that I'm looking at, Sam, they do look a little bit bulkier. All right, but did the U.S. produce sports cars, roadsters, as they're saying here? Based on Motor Junkie's definition, yeah, the Woodhill Wildfire was another one. There was the Kellison. There was a number of kit or, well, home manufactured type cars you put together yourself, that you could buy fiberglass bodies that were just amazing looking cars. And as a matter of fact, one of the leading companies to produce reproduction Cobras is here in the U.S. Are those roadsters? Yes. No side windows. They got curtains, if you get that option. They've got a canvas top, if you get that option. But they are a true roadster. And they're continuing the legacy. As a matter of fact, they're licensed by Shelby American to produce it. But the Corvette definitely comes into that with the side curtains originally. And based on Motor Junkie's definition, so do the 2-seat Thunderbirds, both first and second generation. So think about that. Roadsters, driving topless. Way to go. I've done it for years. You should too. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You got gas, the morning edition. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm back. And we'll be back again tomorrow for more automotive trivia and information. Sam, I do appreciate when you tune in because you give us some great information that I miss. I love it. Thanks a lot. GAAS, the Great American Auto Scene, supported by Service Tech Equipment in Simi Valley, California, with all the equipment you need for your shop. Valley Head Service in the San Fernando Valley. They work on all engines, exotic to the mild-mannered. And I was over there the other day, a 4-valve cylinder head for a Model A engine. Special engine, special head. It was made in the 30s. They were charged with restoring this cylinder head and getting it right. As a matter of fact, they just did one for me for a Morris Minor 1000 I'm helping the Murphy Museum out with. You guys have a great day. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the Great American Auto Scene. And if you go to my Facebook page, Bob Beck on Facebook, please click on the link and vote for me. I'm trying to get on with Orange County choppers and build a chopper. But I need your votes. So go to it now. It's a special event that's going on, put out by the guys on, I guess, the Discovery Channel where it shows up. But check it out because I need your vote. I'm in the top 6 right now, and you can get involved with this as well. And it's called Vote for Robert Beck. That's me. I'm Robert, really, honestly. And it is Paul Tuttle, Sr., putting together a program, thedreamchopper.com. So go to dreamchopper.com and vote for me. I appreciate it. You guys have a great day. I'm Hot Rod Bob. You've got gas, the morning edition.